I've often brought you videos talking about super powerful entities, the most powerful gods, the strongest heroes of a certain class, and so on. But what about the weakest ones? Just like there are physically weaker heroes, the same applies to cosmic entities. Not all of them are insanely powerful. Some have powers far below others, although they're still stronger than the vast majority of beings in the universe. And those are the ones we'll talk about in today's video. The In-Betweener isn't necessarily a weak entity, but let's be honest, he's far from being one of the most powerful. He was created by two far superior cosmic beings, Order and Chaos. The first time he drew serious attention was when he kidnapped Adam Warlock to forcibly turn him into the Avatar of Life, hoping to balance out the destruction caused by Thanos, since Thanos is the Avatar of Death. However, the experiment failed and nearly drove Adam insane. Later, the In-Betweener was stopped by Doctor Strange when he tried to gather energy to restore balance by creating universal madness. At one point, the In-Betweener exceeded his cosmic role by trying to destroy Galactus, even claiming to be his opposite. But he was defeated again. This time, he took control of the Soul Gem, but was trapped by Order and Chaos inside a sphere so strong that not even he could break it, even with the gem. Eventually, Thanos found him, and together they shattered the sphere. But the In-Betweener was tricked by Thanos, who stole the Soul Gem from him. Soon after, the In-Betweener was recaptured by his creators. His track record is so bad that he was once reduced to a mortal amnesiac teenager and kept in captivity at Area 51 until he was rescued by America Chavez from the Teen Brigade. Even so, I wouldn't say he's one of the absolute weakest entities in today's video, but he definitely deserves a spot here. He's strong enough to give trouble to minor gods and lesser entities, but against the heavyweights, he's nowhere near being a worthy rival. However, that was part of Marvel's previous cosmic hierarchy. In the current 8th Cosmos, it was revealed that this hierarchy was outdated and needed adjustments. So it's possible that today, the In-Betweener doesn't even have that much power over Death anymore and can no longer use her like some sort of ultimate weapon. As Marvel slowly heads toward the 9th Cosmos, we'll see if these two will interact again, if they interact at all. Moving on, the Elders of the Universe are an entire group of characters who together can cause some real damage, but individually they're not much of a threat. Most of the time, the group includes the Grandmaster, the Runner, the Gardener, the Champion, Ego the Living Planet, and the Collector. There are more of them, but these are the most popular. They are the last survivors of extinct races, and each of them discovered they had a potentially infinite lifespan. Each one dedicated their existence to an obsession, like being the fastest in the universe, becoming the greatest champion in combat, having the perfect eternal garden, and so on. Because of this, even though they all possess cosmic powers, each one has a different specialty. For example, the Runner is vastly faster than his brothers. The Collector has an arsenal of weapons and rare artifacts greater than the others, and so on. Among them, I would exclude Ego, the Living Planet. He's truly extremely powerful and has even scared off Galactus when Galactus tried to take a bite out of his planet as a snack. The others, however, are only a real threat when they unite their powers. They once threatened Thanos when the Titan went against them. At the same time, even together, they weren't able to defeat Galactus, despite having a considerable numerical advantage. Individually, their track record is even worse. Even with the Infinity Gems, they've been humiliated both physically and intellectually by Thanos. The Champion begged for mercy even while wielding the Power Gem. The Grandmaster has lost to the Avengers and alternate versions of heroes, and the Collector has struggled against secondary characters and Galactus's heralds. So like I said, except for Ego, who is indeed extremely powerful, the rest of the Elders are at best mid-tier when it comes to cosmic entities. The character Epoch is a cosmic being, the master of the protectors of the universe, and the daughter of the late Eon, who is known for granting powers through the quantum bands. Due to Thanos' interference with Eon's body, Epoch needed help from Quasar to hatch from her egg. She was born smaller than a human and relied on the heroes to keep her alive. After the death of Greg Willis, Earth's hero known as Gravity, Epoch took his body and wrapped it in a chrysalis, hoping that in time he would emerge as the next protector of the universe. This process was interrupted by the Black Panther and the Fantastic Four, who ended up clashing with the Silver Surfer nearby. Galactus had plans to consume Epoch, forcing Gravity and the Fantastic Four to fight against his heralds. When Gravity fed Galactus with his cosmic protector power, Epoch was saved, but Willis refused her offer to return him to the chrysalis. So Epoch left humanity in gratitude for their protection and presumably went off to look for another protector candidate, since she simply left without telling anyone where she was going. Overall, that's literally all we have about the character. At least from what I found, there are no other feats or relevant mentions. She's on this list because she is a very young entity, and therefore nowhere near the power level of her father. She's still an entity in the process of maturing. To be honest, I can't remember any other cosmic being as young as Epoch, born tens of thousands of years after the other cosmic entities. But even though that's understandable, it doesn't change the fact that she's much weaker than the rest, and that's why she's in today's video. The Goblin Force was born at the beginning of reality during the Big Bang, and in theory, it should be one of the most insane entities in the cosmos. That's because it's considered a counterpart to the Phoenix Force, a cosmic rival in importance, hierarchy, and power. Like the Phoenix, the Goblin Force once had unlimited power, but unlike the Phoenix, it drew its strength from an unquenchable hunger. This hunger led it to consume entire galaxies, and at one point it encountered one of the many avatars of the Phoenix, consuming the entity itself. Even Galactus, the devourer of worlds, fell under the power of the Goblin Force's hunger, and it was only when the fifth host of the Celestials opposed it that the entity was finally defeated. Many years later, the Goblin Force took the opportunity to connect to the life force of Madelyne Pryor, turning her into a new channel to return to the world. The two were reborn as the Goblin Queen, corrupting Madelyne Pryor and waging war against the X-Men. Eventually, the Goblin Force was contained once again by Scotty Summers, the son of Madelyne Pryor and Alex Summers, who was said to have celestial-level potential. The Goblin Force later returned by possessing the Beyonder's comatose body, adding his powers to its own, and launched another war against Earth's heroes, even teaming up with Dracula. It was defeated and came back once or twice more, but eventually fell into obscurity and hasn't been relevant in the comics since. But if the Goblin Force dealt with so many powerful entities, why is it on this list? The answer is simple: it no longer has the strength to accumulate more power. As I mentioned, its strength comes from what it consumes, and after its defeats, it has spent eras weakened. Today, it depends much more on the bodies it possesses, like the Beyonder or Madelyne Pryor. But it's not every day that powerful hosts like these appear, right? In fact, even with Madelyne, the Goblin Force wasn't able to fully free itself and eventually returned to the weakened state it was in before. If it somehow manages to break free again and consume entire galaxies, it might return as a powerful cosmic entity. But first, some writer would have to remember that it exists and decide to make it a major threat again. Moving on again, hunger was a universal-scale parasite that existed outside the known universe, within the Great Cosmic Vortex, feeding on entire realities. When the Infinity Gauntlet was assembled for the first time, it caught hunger's attention and drew it toward Earth 616, where it intended to devour that reality, just as it had supposedly done with many others in the past. However, the nature of Reality 616 required someone from within to create a breach for hunger to enter. Hunger manipulated Galactus's technology and thoughts, convincing him that the Infinity Gems could permanently end his need to consume living planets. When Galactus gathered the gems together at a crucial point, instead of solving his hunger, he unintentionally opened a portal to the vortex, allowing hunger to breach into Earth 656. Fortunately, Thanos was paying attention to what was happening. He destroyed the portal and scattered the gems across the universe again. Still, a small portion of hunger managed to remain in the 616 reality, forcing both the Mad Titan and the Devourer of Worlds to fight it. Even weakened, Galactus was victorious, and the threat was extinguished, at least the fraction of hunger that we saw fighting. I added hunger to this list because we have no idea of its full power, only mentions and implications. The portion of its power that reached the 6116 universe was defeated by a hungry Galactus, who had just been struggling against Thanos moments earlier. So clearly, this was not the most powerful version of hunger ever seen. In sixth place, I took the liberty of adding two characters. Since both don't have much history, they're brothers, and they're equally weak. The two are young Celestials, so young that they're extremely small, about the size of the Hulk, standing a little over 2 or maybe 3 meters tall. Meanwhile, all the major and even the secondary Celestials are mountain-sized, with some being larger than planets, and their powers are usually as vast as their size. Of course, size doesn't necessarily dictate power, but artists often use it to represent how imposing and threatening a cosmic being is supposed to be. Anyway, these two were assigned to watch over Earth, since over the years, the planet became extremely important to the cosmos. The two were very competitive and almost caused the destruction of Earth. They even tampered with the time stream to summon the Hulk from a not-so-distant future. Gamaliel was disgusted that these so-called small folk, as they were named by Devron, managed to defeat his creations, the Killer Folk. So he brought the future Hulk and sent him against the small folk and their champion, Devil Dinosaur. Eventually, Devron and Gamaliel were reassigned to coordinate the first meeting between the Kree and the Skrulls, which many theorize was the initial spark of the war between the two races. And this wasn't some minor event. The Kree-Skrull War lasted 4 million years and is still going on even in alternate futures. They are far from being the most powerful Celestials and especially not the most competent, so that's why they're on today's list. Continuing with the Celestials, Ea the Wise is another who deserves to be here, and his size is even more impressive than the previous two. While Devron and Gamaliel are at least 2 meters tall, Ea is smaller than a human's head, small enough to sit on a person's shoulder. To be honest, we still don't know if Ea actually exists as a character because he could very well be a hallucination of the Machine Man. While alone on a ship, Machine Man began hallucinating a miniature Celestial, and that was the end of it. There were never many explanations. Assuming the character does exist, he belongs here for the same reason as Devron and Gamaliel. He's tiny compared to real and powerful Celestials. If he is just a hallucination of Machine Man and doesn't truly exist, then he makes it into the video as a curiosity. After all, it's still pretty cool to think there's, mentally or not, a Celestial acting like a kind of talking cricket who annoys Machine Man. Finally, Aaron the Watcher is very likely the most powerful entity on this list, perhaps even surpassing the In-Betweener and the Goblin Force, but among his own kind, he ranks far below. Aaron was a dishonest Watcher and the nephew of Uatu, the Watcher stationed on the moon who frequently appears to heroes, especially the Fantastic Four. Unlike other Watchers, Aaron cared very little about their oath to never interfere despite Uatu's attempts to guide him. This is somewhat ironic, considering that Uatu himself interferes all the time, which has become a joke among the Watcher race. Aaron even went beyond his uncle's level of interference because he was a very young and reckless Watcher. The older Watchers allowed Uatu to mentor Aaron while watching over Earth, precisely because of Aaron's problematic history. Aaron tried to interfere with the Fantastic Four while they were helping the Inhuman race living on the moon, but was stopped by Uatu. Later, while the team fought their usual villains, Aaron took the opportunity to collect cell samples from the unconscious Fantastic Four to create clones of them. He then replaced the originals with the clones, putting the real team in suspended animation, allowing the clones to relive the team's early adventures. But none of that really matters. The reason he's on this list, like some other entities I mentioned, is his youth. He is powerful but extremely reckless and, in a way, naive, which allowed Dr. Doom to steal his powers. This not only left Aaron completely powerless, but also unleashed one of the greatest threats to the heroes and one of the most powerful versions of Doom. In an attempt to regain his power, Aaron disguised himself as Uatu to manipulate the Fantastic Four and defeat Dr. Doom, forcing the villain to give up his power. Once the Elder Watchers learned of Aaron's disobedience to the non-interference code, they took him to the Watchers' home planet for judgment, but he managed to escape. As for his powers, he possesses the standard Watcher abilities like generating and manipulating vast amounts of cosmic energy, cosmic awareness, shape-shifting, and more. Being younger, he is most likely weaker than the other Watchers, but I included him on the list because he's simply dumber than the rest, which often leads to his defeat when he makes mistakes. But this is the character that closes today's video. If you liked it, drop a like down below and comment on which of these entities you consider the weakest in all of Marvel. Share the video with that friend who doesn't know much about comics and help the channel keep growing. Thanks and see you next time.